Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the September 25th meeting of the Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee. We have in chambers Lisa Holmes, myself, Veronica Pillar, and Kate Shanks-Booth as far as committee members go. And we have on Zoom Annie Corman, Nick Bennett, and Ken Clark. This does not form a quorum because we would need 7 members, but we are expecting at least a couple more people later. So we will carry ahead. I think for introductions, everyone here knows each other by now. Does anyone feel a need or desire to introduce themselves? Fabulous. Would be fabulous either way. So for changes to the agenda, I guess a couple things. One, we are adding, oh no, I don't have the title. Charlene, what are we adding? Or sort of putting under the Chief Equity and Diversity Officer report?
Institutionalizing equity, methodology, and framework.
Okay, perfect. Any objections to adding that? This was, members had this communicated by email previously. Oh, thank you, Brittany. And then also, if we don't have quorum in the next couple minutes, we'll need to move minutes approval to, I guess maybe let's just move minutes approval to the end of the meeting after the discussion items. Are people okay with that? All right, seeing no objections, that's good. Are there any other changes to the agenda? All right, seeing none. Chair's report. My only thing I want to bring up, since we've talked about the climate survey quite a lot in this committee, is that funding for a climate survey in 2025 has been recommended in the budget that we all, the legislators, are hearing about and deliberating now. There is a proposal to cut funding for the climate survey from the budget from some legislators. And so I would like to ask anyone here who'd like to share what you think the impact of the climate survey would be and why it is important if you do in fact think we should do it. Yeah, Kate?
Yeah, I think it would be a mistake to cut that funding. I do recognize and acknowledge that it's a very difficult budget year, but I feel that the last climate survey that we had, I was employed right after the results came out, and I think that we have done a lot of good work around race and equity and inclusion, and I think employees felt very heard, and to take that off the table, I think would be detrimental to all of the things that we're trying to do in those arenas.
Thanks, Kate. Annie.
Thanks, Veronica. I was wondering about when we discussed this at one of the budget meetings, that if it would be helpful to legislators during our deliberation to have more information on the outcomes and the benefits of the last survey. And I know it was that Lisa Holmes had done I believe a presentation on some of the accomplishments from that.
Yes, I think it would be helpful. I know we could, I haven't had the chance today, send all the legislators at least a timestamp to the video of June's WDIC meeting where we discussed this, or maybe the accomplishments were more from May's. I don't know, I'll find it. There's also the shorter written document from 2022, which doesn't even cover everything because that's 2 years old now, that former Deputy County Administrator Amy Hendricks sent around sort of summarizing progress since the 2018 climate survey. But I'll also look to Lisa if you know of anything else that would be easy to send out or have thoughts.
Yeah, I can look back to the supporting materials that that I provided during that WDIC meeting where we talked about the climate survey in depth. I think that would be really good to send out. And I think, you know, the climate survey itself is a really good, you could call it diagnostic tool, if you will, or, you know, it's a way for employees to state in hopefully a non-threatening, anonymous way of what they're feeling, what the workplace is like. A lot has changed since the last time we administered one in 2018. We had a global pandemic. There's been leadership changes. There have been structural changes in departments. We did a tremendous amount in follow-up to the results that we had in the last climate survey, and it's just it's a great indicator of the climate, the temperature of our workforce, and what our employees are feeling, in a good way to address if we're seeing trends in certain areas, good or bad. It's, you know, it gives us the opportunity to celebrate accomplishments and also to look at areas in need of attention and improvement and focus on those. So I really value the climate survey. That's why it was recommended in the budget as a one-time expense.
Charlene?
As a follow-up to Lisa, it'd be great for all of us to be on the same page about our strategic plan, which underneath organizational excellence as an objective, the little blurb says that we want to create an organization that has a sense of belonging. One of those processes that we use in order to achieve that as a goal is the climate survey. And so if we want to live out that organizational excellence statement, it's almost imperative that we continue with the climate survey as a means to help us achieve the rest of our objectives under organizational excellence.
Thank you. Any other comments on this topic? All right, seeing none, just for the record, we have Rachel Graham now with us in chambers, so we do have quorum, but we'll stick with the agenda change and move minutes to the end, and we have Jen Micah on Zoom. So, welcome everybody. Let us move on to reports and updates. Chief Equity and Diversity Officer, Charlene, to you, and up to you whether you want to do the institutionalizing equity methodology and framework first or anything else first.
Hi, everyone. I'd rather present first because the co-chair of our JEDI group and Ken Clark, Rachel, they're here and most of our work overlaps, so they'll give some more robust updates on the back end. But I'd like to start with my presentation. Just give me a second. Okay. All right. So this will still have the department head meeting date on it because I wanted everyone to know that the department heads have been able to engage with this presentation and the accompanying documents, which was a document about equity indicators and the full methodology and framework portion of the report. So underneath our organizational excellence objective of our strategic plan, our first objective is to develop an equity action plan. And that is going to be what our institutionalizing equity report is. I'm going to go through the methodology and framework and provide you guys with an overview of how we're going to approach institutionalizing equity from an organizational level. So as you guys know, Tompkins County has its mission and its vision that was created through the strategic plan. The reason why I'm reintroducing this to us is because, you know, our vision and our mission was developed through our strategic plan, and I want folks to recognize that our institutionalizing equity report will run in line with our strategic plan. It's not tangential, it's running parallel. We have our core values: respect, accountability, integrity, equity, stewardship. Another reminder is that through our community circles or community engagement feedback circles that we had related to our strategic plan, some of that feedback was that respect should have been our first value. So these values are actually lined in order of importance to our community. The feedback was we couldn't have respect without accountability, without integrity, without equity, and then we've added that stewardship. Our diversity statement, I will iterate. Tompkins County government centers diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are committed to the empowerment of employees and residents to dismantle systemic barriers that inhibit inclusive governance and the provision of governmental services for all. I'm repeating this because this has been words on a paper for a very long time. And prior to my arrival, it was asked, well, how would you be able to bring this diversity statement to life in conjunction with our staff and our community members and at the request of the county administrator? And one of those was instituting an equity action plan through the adoption of a framework. So institutionalizing equity provides us, the report is going to provide us the actual report is going to be, a comprehensive strategic document that outlines our commitment to embedding DEI principles into the fabric of our governance, our operations, and our service delivery. It's really going to require all of us to think outside of how we see DEI and infuse that into our everyday work. So it's going to provide a roadmap for us to systematically integrate equity across all our county departments, policies, and practices. And this particular report is going to help to ensure that every aspect of our work is aligned with the values of fairness, justice, and inclusivity. Now, how we're going to do that, or what the institutionalizing equity report does, is it provides a strategic blueprint for equity. It provides our guiding DEI integration. It gives us assessment and accountability. It's a catalyst for cultural change and a commitment to sustained action. This is a best practice across governmental landscapes. And so when you're looking at other governments that are doing embedding equity or trying to institutionalize equity, they have taken this approach. The methodology we'll use to achieve this goal is we are going to align or draw from our strategic plan priority areas, and we're going to accompany those with what we call equity indicators. And the way we're going to do that is through incorporating an equity mindedness framework and leveraging our current infrastructure to create a systematic and comprehensive approach to equity. And it's going to serve as the foundation for us developing departmental work plans, which act as our primary conduit for embedding equity into our organizational practices. So departments are developing their budgets, had developed their budgets, they're going through budget season. When we go into work plans for 2025, departments have already identified which strategic objectives they will be working on for 2025. So we're asking departments to identify with those strategic objectives an equity indicator that they're going to be able to measure and build into their work plan. And that will be our way to embed equity across the organization. Now, we're going to ask a few questions. It'll guide our efforts systematically, and it gives us an inclusive approach. There are some questions that we ask of department heads. there were some questions that were asked before we developed this particular, and I say we, myself and the interns, looking at my predecessor's work, talking to Jedi. This is like a collaborative nature. How do current departmental policies and practices support or hinder equity? We want to look at training and resources, partnerships and collaborations, data, and our strategic priority areas. Now, some of the key steps that we have is the adoption of the equity mindedness framework, a strategic alignment, and the utilization of equity indicators, along with those key questions. The equity mindedness framework was developed by Estella Benison and through her work at the Urban Education Race and Equity Center, and it helps individuals learn how to use data, inquiry, and self-reflection to see institutional racism and dismantle it, which is aligned with our diversity statement. And forgive me, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm not as on point as I usually am. So sorry, guys. Equity mindedness is going to give us a cognitive schema that leaders and staff can develop to address racial inequity within their organizations. It has 5 components: evidence-based, race-conscious, systemically aware, institutionally focused, and equity advancing. My presentation is a little more wordier than you all's. You have the regular version, the more palatable version. The strategic alignment to the strategic plan is going to provide us with that comprehensive framework. And so each department will, for example, in equitable service delivery, they're going to ensure that all residents have full and convenient access to person-centered county services. Our performance measures are the percentage of public clients who indicate knowledge of county programs and how many staff receive equity training annually. An equity indicator, however, will measure and benchmark how we access and monitor the progress within an organizational community. And these indicators provide us with quantitative and qualitative understanding of how well we're addressing disparities specifically and promoting that fairness across the organization. So examples of equity indicators are crime rates, poverty prevention, grocery access, transportation, community engagement. Some of this work is already being done within our departments. So we're looking to help departments extract that work and put a name to it and then measure it and provide us with progress over time. I like to use COFA because they are my, they're the department that has they've been tracking this for a very long time. Their governing agency requires this, but they're able to have so much flexibility when it comes to an equity indicator. So for example, if we talk about grocery access and food deserts, in the work that COFA is doing, they would be able to measure the availability of nutritious and affordable food options for older adults, particularly in areas known as food deserts. Now, what makes this very interesting is that the department head that oversees COFA caught wind of GIS's work with our diversity index by district and asked how to access that information so they could better target areas where they were falling short in their outreach for the Hispanic community. So they're already utilizing some of the infrastructures that have been built, and over time they would be able to track that progress fairly easily and identify that as an equity indicator and build that into their work plan. I've provided department heads with some questions that they could ask in this chart. How do current departmental policies and practices support or hinder equity? That would mean that they would have to review existing policies and practices for potential barriers, and then identify what that outcome would be, and that would be the removal of inequitable policies and practices, and then align that to a strategic plan priority, which would be organizational excellence. This will get into more detail, it's just an overview, but this is the way we're looking to help and partner with our department heads to work the equity indicators into their work plan so we can continue to embed that equity across the organization. So I asked department heads, I actually started with this slide. Each department will actively engage in the guidance provided in the completed institutionalizing equity report and leverage the methodology, the frameworks, and the development of equity indicators. And for their 2025 work plans, they will be asked to select 1 to 2 equity indicators that align with our strategic plan areas. And the timeline is as follows. We're looking to present the methodology and framework in September. There will be the first draft of the institutionalizing equity report distributed to all department heads and community stakeholders in October. November would require some editing and feedback, and then in December, we'd be looking to go through any legislative processes for adoption. That's it. I hope I didn't bore you guys. Ooh, sorry. Any questions, comments, feedback?
I have a couple of questions. One is I'm just curious, well, I'll say I'm curious how things went or what like new information came up to you when you presented to the department heads. But in case that's weird to answer, I'm just going to slide into my second question, which is the legislature itself is a part of this organization, but not quite its own department. And we, as just a set of elected officials and no one else, tend to, I don't know, we don't have to do a lot of the things that we or others require all our staff to do, but this seems like something that some of the institutionalizing equity work, the legislature could probably stand to take on as its own body. I guess my question is, have you thought about that? Does that make sense?
Yes, I've thought about that. Excuse me.
I guess I want to also say, recognizing that the power structures here are not set up such that you can tell us what to do, but the policies are set up that per everything we've committed to, we should listen to your advice.
Yeah, I think that it would be a great suggestion for us to move in that direction as WDIC, right? Like you all would be the ones who have the leverage to ask our legislature to take on an equity indicator and measure that progress over time, especially through our institutionalizing equity report, which would be the roadmap for it, right? Me, myself, as a CEDO, I wouldn't think that I would be able to say, hey, legislator, like, I can work in partnership with department heads, but I don't know how that would look at the legislative level. I think that the special committee would be the appropriate place to provide that guidance.
Okay, thank you.
Also, I really would like to say that the department heads seem to have been very receptive to it, and when I got some feedback on the back end, they were actually like, yeah, I've been doing this work, and it'll be really nice to name the work, right, that I've been doing and be able to measure that and speak clearly about the work that we're already doing.
Annie.
Thank you for the presentations, Charlene, and all this work. My question I was going to ask, Veronica already asked, but I just wanted to say that this, to me, seems to dovetail so well into what you were saying about people have been telling us they're doing some of this work. Employees are telling us that they want more of this work to happen in the county. So this is that happening. And so it's very heartening to see this and to hear about it. So thank you so much. And the last thing I just want to say is regarding this and some other things of just that WDIC is the place where we need to send a message, because we're an advisory board to the legislature. So although this has to do with funding, getting back to spending money for the survey. So I just wondered if we want to talk about that another time during the meeting, do we want to send a message, somehow a consensus message to the legislature about advocating for the funding for the survey?
Nick?
Thank you. Sort of piggybacking on Annie's statement and questions, with the message that we maybe want to send, before you even mentioned that part, Annie, I was noticing a piece of Charlene's presentation. It was like one of the charts, and an area that was like goals or sort of what we want to like gain from looking at these equity indicators and like implementing them was that data-driven decision making. And one part of this is like, I really appreciate the language that you've been able to give us, Charlene, and I mean everybody in this committee, but like being able to kind of hear that kind of language, data-driven decision making, makes me think about the climate survey, and that's a great way in my mind to frame a reason why we need something like this, something like the climate survey, but also, intersectionally why the equity indicators and why that kind of work is important. We in this committee, but I think in many, many departments, if not all the departments, are constantly looking for more data, right? Well, if we're not doing the work to try to collect the data, then we're not going to have data, are we, right? So I really appreciate that data-driven decision-making. And the other piece of language, the food deserts. I feel like I've heard that before, but I think that's such a like clever and I know like I don't think you created that, Charlene, but maybe like I'll give you credit for it if you want.
No, I can't take credit.
Just thinking about, I mean, I lived in Ulysses and in Enfield, and especially Enfield. I lived there for 5 years, and like a one car household with 2 adults, 2 driving adults. And food desert was absolutely something I would use to describe that area. And I love that area. But resource-wise, like when I looked at your presentation and like what sort of constituted as that food desert, that grocery inequity, I was like, we have that in our county. And it's just, these are really, really important issues, and just thank you for the language to be able to discuss them.
I appreciate that, Nick. I think the department heads felt similar. Can't speak for all of them, but there was definitely oh wow, yeah, food desert or food apartheid, right? Where food is available, but it's not nutritious. There are so many different terminologies and ways to measure. And I feel like it's exciting to be able to move in a direction where we might be able to do that more thoughtfully and more collaboratively. Because we also found in the department head meetings, not to go down the rabbit hole, but we also found that there were departments that were able to work on equity indicators together in conjunction with one another. So my department's equity indicator is really contingent upon how your department, operates in that equity indicator. So it encourages that into collaboration between departments as well, so we can have that more cohesive approach, and then we can measure the impact on communities a little bit more focused in a more nuanced way. I wish GIS was here, because the next step is like looking at a map and being able to zone into the map. It's called equity mapping. It's super cool. Like we can take I'm gonna get out of my nerdy self, but yes.
I would love to learn more about that. I was also just looking up grocery stores in Tompkins County on Google Maps, which, tells you something, but this is not what it's made for. It's bad though, y'all. Lisa.
Thanks. I just wanted to also highlight or underscore what Charlene has laid out and where we expect this to go will fulfill what this committee was requesting of us and of departments this year, but this is kind of the rollout, the planned way to roll it out and have it be kind of systematized and part of the way we operate and do business, so it's not just a one and done type of thing.
Totally. Thank you for saying that. Other questions or comments on the institutionalizing equity framework?
Not just a question, and Lisa, you might be able to answer this. When we're talking about equity indicators and how, talking about data-driven and looking at how we're aligning our spending with our priorities, has there been any thought or consideration how we might also roll this out into funded agencies throughout the community? What might be the expectations around that?
That's great food for thought. Kate? I'm not sure that I haven't had that discussion yet, so I think it's probably something worth thinking about and talking about some more. Thank you.
We also have under
Use the mic.
economic, we also have, under economic, the priority area, quality of life, economic
Opportunity?
opportunities, yes. Under economic opportunities and quality of life, I believe there is an objective that allows for us to further analyze spending at that level. So we might be able to utilize that particular objective as a way to help encourage our partners to take on this lens as well. And that came up in the planning sessions that, where is the spending going? How are we aligning our spending with the expectations of our partners?
I think looking at the strategic priorities document, there's under economic opportunity and quality of life, one of the performance measures says analysis of outside agency funding for non-mandated services by 2026. Is that what you're thinking of?
Yes, that's the performance measure, and then there's the language that we can kind of play around with in the objective piece.
Right.
I guess using the wrong terminology.
There's one that says collaborate with and provide appropriate financial support to partner institutions that support economic well-being.
I don't think that's the one. It's one
Okay.
of those.
Well, I'm not going to find it immediately.
But the performance measure is there, so we know, I think we might be able to utilize that.
Okay. Rachel, did you have your hand up? And
Yeah, I
then
was
calling
just
on
going to
myself.
say that there's a lot of good information about equity mapping on the GARE network too, which we all have access to. So there's some really cool stuff there if you want to check it out.
Thank you. While we're talking about the strategic plan, and this is piggybacking off of Kate's question, which I think is good, is that we're also supposed to be, and I think the departments did use the strategic priorities and objectives in coming up with their budget requests. Do correct me if I'm wrong, and we're supposed to be grounding budget decisions, at least for non-mandated things in that. Just naively halfway through the legislator part of the process, I don't think that the legislature is, we have not jumped from zero to incorporating that into our thought process, I will say. And so I guess both I want to name that and say that there's maybe in conjunction with rolling out the equity framework and embedding it into the budget decision making and everything, both for internal to the county and for funding agencies. I think that embedding the strategic plan itself into the budget decision-making is still a work in progress, and maybe those can go together, even though one has technically already started. It's still a work in progress. And this is actually really going more off topic, but I'm the chair, so I'm forgiving myself. Since I'm looking at the performance measures in the strategic plan, I guess this is a question for Lisa. That analysis I mentioned is not like this, but a lot of these are numbers and pieces of data that we'd expect to change over time. Do we have like starting or current or most recent numbers for all of these, the performance measures? I'm not asking you to give them right now, that would be silly.
Yeah. Baseline where we're starting from?
Yeah.
I think I think it is a work in progress, and we have chosen measurable, or we're working with the departments that have identified strategic priorities in the plan to come up with those indicators that are measurable, and whether or not some of them may have baseline data and others may be starting with, developing baseline data. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And there's also the work of the KPIs that Bridget and Norma have been working on. So folks are able to extract from what they've chosen previously. I know you're a department head. You might be able to, find the correlations between what you already have identified in the strategic priority areas.
Yeah, we are, results-based accountability started in youth services, and we've moved things to KPI. So I think those conversations have all been done.
KPIs being key performance indicators.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and I think it'll be an easy transition if it's listed in the plan.
Are the key performance indicators supposed to be some things that eventually the public will see?
Yes, and they are, I think, not all, but some of them, I believe that they are working on public-facing KPIs in OpenGov. Accurate.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments?
I just want to thank Lisa for her support on this. I think it's hard to do DEI work when it's not supported, but our county administrator supports this fully, and I just want to thank you, Lisa, for that.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Charlene, and thank you for doing and presenting this work. Do you have more within the Chief Equity and Diversity Officer update or report or whatever it says?
No, I can pass it over to our co-chairs of JEDI. Thank you.
Right, Rachel and Ken. Rachel?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Rachel, co-chair of JEDI and an employee at the county clerk's office and member of this committee. JEDI's been working on a few things. We've had some kind of committees form naturally out of the work that we've been doing. One is a communications committee and a policy committee. So one thing that we're just starting to work on and put together is a marketing campaign on how we do equity work intentionally. We're working on putting together a video where we're going to interview county employees and ask them a set of questions about the equity work that they're doing in their departments. So that's just getting started. We have a policy committee that's been working over the last number of weeks on reviewing and updating the county's diversity and inclusion policy. And we kind of went on a journey together and worked on a process to ensure that we're analyzing that policy through an equity lens in an effort to update the policy, ensuring that it's aligned with our current mission, vision, values, and the strategic plan priorities, because those are all new since that policy was last updated. And the finishing touches are just getting put to that now, and we're expecting to bring that here to WDIC next month. Let's see, I want to shout out our facilitators for the Equity Exchange and Reading and Discussion Group. We last met on September 17th. Our theme for that, thank you for that, session was intersections of identity and health, and Emily Kuhl facilitated that. It was an awesome discussion. We've got a great group of people that are coming to that, and it's great to connect with folks from other departments to discuss these topics and how it relates to the work that we're all doing every day. Next up, we've got October 15th, also up at Whole Health. Theme on that one is Understanding Systemic Racism, and that will be facilitated by Kevin McGuire. After that, November 12th, with Dialogue and Action, and I will be facilitating that session. Otherwise, we are also continuing to work slowly through our own JEDI reading and discussion group. We're still reading Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad, and that also has been some really great discussions, and really, it's a lot of internal work that I think is necessary for everyone doing this work to do, even as someone who has been trying to do that work for a lot of years. This has been a much deeper dive for me, and really helpful. I don't know if I'm missing anything. That's all I had down. Ken, is there anything I'm missing?
I don't have anything to add. I think you pretty thoroughly addressed the work of the committee.
Awesome, thank you. Questions for Team JEDI co-chairs? Charlene.
I just have to shout out Team JEDI. No, I mean, folks have been doing so much work. Like, these are not small things, right? Going through a policy retreat, coming up with a campaign, developing a reading and discussion group curriculum. Like, they're doing so much work that's outside of the scope of their everyday work. And they don't complain, they show up, they're so dedicated. And I couldn't be happier to work with these folks. And I just want you guys to know, if you're watching, I love you. Thank you so much for all your work, because I can see the trend over the years. The work that you've put in has gotten this organization to this space, and it's just very nice to see how staff can make that happen. You have a voice, you're heard, you're making waves, making changes. Don't give up. I need you. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. Nick.
Yeah, I just from a much lower level, but as soon as Rachel was describing the two new committees that have come about naturally in JEDI, the communications committee and the policy committee, I went into Zoom. I was looking for the applause emoji reaction, because I was like, oh my gosh. First of all, to be able to add these, add these new committees sort of ad hoc because you see a need for them is fabulous. And I think the flexibility to be able to do that is really really, really wonderful. And just that the two sort of big pieces that Rachel, you were describing, the campaign, I think I heard it properly, the campaign to sort of see or address the like disparities in service or in coverage in the community, and then the policy committee revising or looking at potential revisions to the language in our policies. Those are things that we in WDIC have tried to tackle. We've like put those on our to-do lists, and I know the committee subcommittee I was chair of with JEDI, those were two things that we were constantly grappling with. So it's just really cool to see like actionable action steps being taken. So the applause emoji is real.
Thank you.
With our campaign, it's a play on DEI, do equity intentionally. And so WDIC will need to be like completely highlighted in this campaign. The campaign is also a way for us to externally share with our constituents like what work is actually happening at the county related to DEI. There's so much, and it's not as easily accessible right now, but as Dom and his team get us ready to get to this new website space, we're looking to have it be, we do equity intentionally, be a campaign, everyone's excited. So I would love for WDIC to start thinking about how you do equity intentionally, because we will be interviewing you.
Right, thank you. I think actually that, unless anyone's got something else to say, might be the perfect transition into our first discussion topic about refocusing of WDIC. I think this is a continuation of what we talked about at our last meeting 2 months ago, when we started going over goals and then realized that they were too much and didn't fit and were all over the place. And also that WDIC as designed hasn't really reevaluated, I know I'm speaking of the committee like it's a person, but hasn't really reevaluated its role and ideal scope and position within the county structure since it was created. And when it was created, it was the only DEI game not in town, but like in the county organization. And now, as Charlene has just said and highlighted and Rachel highlighted, it is very, very much not. So, but it is still situated, at least as structured now, in a unique place, and it's worth intentional thought, really thinking about what the role of WDIC is and should be in being a generative, collaborative player in all of the equity work through the county. And so I think I'd just like to open up the discussion to more thoughts, and in particular, anything bouncing off from the institutionalizing equity methodology and framework, or if available to share, any of the Team JEDI members, which might just be the co-chairs of the people here, I don't know, or anyone else who's been looking at the diversity and inclusion policy and updating it. I haven't done that review or seen the updates, but maybe those who have thoughts brewing because of it. So, sorry, that's not a super focused prompt, but that's what we got. That's the point of trying to focus. Floor is open for comments. Nick.
Yeah, I think one of the key pieces that is also like a celebration in a sense is that right, WDIC was formed in 2005, so what, that's like almost 20 years ago. And that's really wild. But that there's so many more DEIJ committees and venues that are doing this work. And so thinking about like what makes WDIC unique and different from those, maybe in like the powers that we have in this committee versus some of those other venues or other vehicles. I'm using like metaphor terms. But like what can we do differently? What can we do better or like improve upon that other vehicles for DEIJ work are not able to do? And with no fault to those other vehicles, just like what are we in the position of doing differently or more than others? I guess that's really just a question, and like possibly rhetorical or like food for thought to consider.
I think it's a good question, and no one vehicle can do it all. Like certainly WDIC can't, neither can anything else. So I think no criticism to any other at all. Kate?
Yeah, I think as I think about like the role for the future and what we want to play, I think the thing keeps coming back to me is the feedback from the legislature. I think as we are moving forward with transition for a new county administrator and as things are, it's just the organization itself is changing. I think when we talked about at that level what they are embracing and sort of what they're doing, I think leadership, it starts at the top of the county. So I think sharing in this framework gives us a common language, and that helps in embedding these policies and practices not just in WDIC but into our health and human services and all of the other committees that we report to. But I think it would be really interesting to hear as they develop what they're going to, what you are going to embrace as a legislator and your fellow legislators, I think, and what they would like to see from us, I think is going to be a really important piece of that conversation.
Okay, thank you. So to make sure I understand, you're saying an important piece of the like, what should WDIC be doing is to have feedback to, I guess, you all, to staff and other committee members from the legislature at large as like what would be helpful to us, the legislature, in like fulfilling our equity related goals. Because I guess one thing that's come up a lot is WDIC has a bit of a convoluted but direct way to advise the legislature on things, more so than many of the other vehicles. I'm just gonna latch onto that metaphor and run with it. Is that right?
Yeah, I think just, you know, as we're informing and trying to make sure that information is getting into your legislators' hands, how would that be most effectively done? What do they see? And then how do we respond? I mean, I think it's a two-way street, of course, but I think just given we're still trying to figure out what they are implementing and how they want that to look, I think it would be really important to have that information as we continue this conversation.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Other thoughts? And maybe another like specific prompt I'll toss out there is the question of if you can think of any other like equity related vehicles such as Team Jedi or even just one of its committees, or I don't know, think of anything that touches the county. If you have ideas of how WDIC could interact with that or have some power that you see another DEI implementation vehicle stymied by not having, that WDIC might have. Any of those pieces are helpful.
I'm just kind of brainstorming here in the spirit of this. I mean, it's, you know, we're one big organization, and we move at the speed of the in some ways the legislature and the policy directives given, and yet we're also trying to drive policy from the staffing and management perspective, but we don't, you know, we need to be in alignment with one another with those policies and where we're going. So if we are, you know, so I see WDIC and as advisory to the legislature, as advisory to BCP, as an important membrane, if you will, keeping a two-way communication, keeping legislature members informed, and maybe in some ways engaging them or finding ways to engage the larger body in the work that many that are involved in WDIC and Team Jedi and in the organization itself are involved with, and informing us, you know, as if we are doing a lot of this work, or, you know, as Rachel was saying, you know, participating in these discussion groups or taking trainings. And
Sorry to interrupt. When you say we, I think a lot of us will have pronoun problems here. Do you mean the committee or the administration or any staff?
Staffing.
Okay.
I'm saying,
Yes.
so staffing in the broad sense. Thank you for clarifying that. If staff are involved in that and it's not made available to the legislature, we're not in sync, and we're not, you know, using the same language, and, you know, in some ways we're making assumptions or getting out ahead of the legislature, our policy-making body. And so I'm just thinking about that two-way communication and what might be valuable, you know, telling us ways that it might be valuable for legislators to be able to participate in training, in reading and discussion groups, and in what format. And is it better for the legislature as a group to have be offered training separate from staff or together with staff, those sorts of things. I think those discussions would be useful.
Thank you. Annie?
Yeah, I would like to say yes to everything that Lisa was saying and others have said. I think that's a key thing as we're looking at, for instance, one indicator of that is the climate survey, since we've already talked about that. You know, one question from a legislator at a budget meeting was, well, did we follow up on anything from the one that was done in 2018? So that was one question, but also as we have, and I'll say we, I'll be very specific. I think I can include Veronica in this, and I'll leave it up to other people if they feel included in this. But when we're talking about these issues, as Lisa said, we don't even, and we've talked with Charlene and others about, we don't have even the basic terms that we agree upon. You know, we bring up something like equitable, and that means one thing to us and something to somebody else. So I think figuring this out, and maybe this can be a goal of the committee to work on, as far as exactly what was said, like what kind of training will the legislators have. I would like to, I've been an advocate of that from the very beginning, because if we are wanting, you know, you look at our strategic our strategic plan, and we want, see some of our, our main goals are about organizational excellence and equitable service delivery. How can we do these things if we don't even have an understanding of what that means? And so to me, this is one of the core ways that we can do this, is to first off have more knowledge about it, and a working knowledge. And working knowledge means you're active in the work, and the more legislators that are active in the work, then they're not going to be surprised or wondering, why are you doing this? Or is this helpful? Do we need to spend money on this? And I think it also goes into possible one of the objectives for WDIC going forward. One of the working tasks for us might be to have a better relationship with the legislature. And I'm not sure exactly how that would pan out, but have a better relationship, a working relationship with members. Thanks.
Thank you. Charlene and then Nick.
I also think about that relationship, to piggyback off of what Annie was saying. It's really important that maybe perhaps WDIC comes up with a format for the updates at the larger legislative meeting. Maybe WDIC has its own formatting of how we share that information, because it's public. All of the legislators are there. Large decisions are being made. That could be a conduit for influence as well. So.
That's a good idea. And, well, I'll say my piece after Nick and then Chantalise.
Yeah, I was just sort of stuck on, I couldn't remember exactly what, when we were discussing the like relationship that WDIC should have with the legislature, but then so I had to kind of remind myself, and I went on to our kind of piece on the Tompkins County website, advisory boards, commissions, and councils. And I know this is like also fairly old, but it was kind of helpful when I looked at this, and like our function says to serve in an advisory capacity on issues relating to diversity and inclusion and employment and service within the Tompkins County workforce. So that piece, and then I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, and to assist the Tompkins County Legislature in fulfilling the goals of the diversity policy. The advisory and the assisting the legislature makes me think of like equity consultants. Like, so I work in filmmaking, and so like equity consultants are brought in to a production to ensure that cultures and even like casting and the makeup of the crew is equitable, is maybe diverse and inclusive and accessible, right? And the piece that really sticks out to me is there's no like assumption that that every film production, I'm still going with the film production thing, has to have these equity consultants. It's that they are invited to advise and to educate and to provide assistance to the production. So in my mind, I'm thinking for WDIC, we maybe won't know exactly where we need to be advising unless we are invited, unless it's a like regular maybe I'm not articulating this in a way that makes sense, but I guess if our function is to advise the ledge and to advise employment and services within the county, we won't know where we are welcome to advise unless we're invited, unless we are told, hey, we need WDIC to provide education, to consult with us on if we are doing inclusive employment practices, for example. So I guess that's where I'm stuck on is, yes, I can see that we need to work with the ledge, but could there be a stronger framework to include us in that in a way that makes sense?
That makes sense. Thank you. Chantalise.
Okay, I apologize how this may come across. So I've been an over 30-year employee of the county, been here a long time. I'm concerned, and maybe I just lost track of where this all came, but is this not a committee of the legislature? This is not an advisory board, right? This is a committee of the ledge.
Well, it's kind of both.
What? Because we never sort
like
of
the
felt
mule
that way
of-
at the beginning, and so I'm kind of coming in like I'm a little concerned about how do we advise, and we're working with you are the legislature, and yes, there are other community members here, so it's kind of a unique setup, but I want what my expectation as an employee of this committee is to facilitate sort of those relationships. And I come from a period of time when staff and the legislative body had a more collegial, familial relationship with each other. I think I spoke about the dragon boat races. That was just one sort of situation where we had a much more close-knit relationship and things were not so seemingly siloed. And I think a big part of that is intentionality of those legislatures in that time, that they were all of one purpose. And maybe that's sort of something that the legislature needs to discuss in a retreat setting or something of that nature. That's just my recommendation. But I would like to see this committee sort of facilitate, whether through JEDI or other sources, like a connection of the staff and the purpose of what the legislature wants to do moving forward for the community. Our job is, to provide services and to help govern what's going on. We need to do that in synchronicity. Like Lisa said, we have to be aligned in order to do that well. I'm just interested as an employee to see that happen. I'm interested to see trainings where we're all there learning the same information at the same time. And it's not just like there's some special training over here for these people and you get this special training over here and nobody knows if it's the same training, a better training, worse training, whatever. We all sort of need to align. And the whole kind of the way we're sort of talking about being advisory in nature and only being brought forward when they sort of deem that they want to hear from this body is concerning to me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your long-time expertise. I'm going to take a turn, and then Annie. Regarding WDSU be a committee, it is, and I very much appreciate your share and don't disagree with any of the the goals, the things you'd want to see, I would also like to see, and some of the stronger connection between staff and legislators from the past. It's a bring Katrina out of her office topic. I love these, yeah. And I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, good. Thank you, Chantalise. The other thing is because we have in the past run into things at this committee where maybe we bring an issue that seems, oh, this seems related to workforce diversity or workforce inclusion. However, it is either maybe like, and maybe it's not supposed to be within the scope of the committee. Maybe the issue is not the point, but what has come up is that staff members on this committee don't feel comfortable or like it's appropriate, or I can't, like, you know, I cannot actually speak for you guys, but have understandably balked at setting and recommending policy within this committee as if from a legislator's point of view, when in other contexts, they are just implementing things that the legislature tells them to do and beholden to, for instance, the budgetary decisions of the legislature. And so that having this committee have staff on it, but then also be like, if it were to be sort of equivalent to the other legislature standing committees, which it clearly already structurally isn't because it reports to BCP. I guess what I'm saying is that it puts some of the members of this committee, which I do realize includes you, and you seem to be feeling different, and so I recognize that, but it puts some members in like two different positions, sort of organizational hierarchically, and from what I've been told, that often that can conflict in a way that the staff members don't necessarily feel that they actually can fully operate in both these different positions without maybe.
I understand and hear that, and I think that just means that we need to do more work to get us there, because if we're all here for one purpose and we are, you know, moving forward in that way, and we're all willing to put in the time and the work here, at least our opinions and input needs to be valued in the same way, whether or not we are part of that final goal or you know, push forward to get something approved or not, whether we have that control in the situation is different, and those people who are staff need to understand that that's what is happening. But when we develop those relationships, I think that it becomes easier for us to operate as a committee and fully, you know, having all of those opinions fleshed out, and then having the chair bring whatever needs to move forward. So obviously I do have a different level of comfort, and maybe that's from doing labor work where we do sit as an equality principle at the table in an equal footing. But I don't think that there is not room for that in discussions here, allowing that the legislators who sit here are the ones who move the issues forward to the full legislature.
That makes sense. Thank you. A couple other things to say, and then I'll pass to Annie. But Charlene, did you have an immediate response to this? Okay. Relating to the relationships thing, and the like not knowing where WDIC is welcome, or like where maybe staff are welcome to express things. I'm not sure if that was said, but the thing that made me think is I, for instance, have never gone to a Team Jedi meeting. And I assume that I wouldn't be welcome there as a legislator. And I wouldn't, yeah. Okay, wait.
You're a legislator, but you're also a staff member, technically on payroll, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we would welcome that.
I am on payroll.
Right.
No one can fire me.
I'm making like the distinctions of how you're seen from the organizational level. And from our purview as Jedi, you would be a part of that. So anything that Jedi has done thus far, the legislature has been invited to that.
no one would object. I can't imagine anyone would.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I definitely
be
understand that I'm invited to like the equity exchange reading groups and things. And the reason I haven't come is just because I can't do weekday noons anymore. But the other thing I wanted to say, talking about like presenting back to the legislature, we do have the like committee update and all the committee updates, and I often don't say much there. But through this conversation, I'm realizing the way the committee updates usually go at a full legislature meeting is that, and I don't know that anyone has explicitly told me that this is how it should be, but it tends to be you say what happened at the most recent meeting, if there was one since you last reported, and you say what's coming up at your next meeting if it's soon enough that you know. And maybe occasionally you share some other piece of information, but that's about it. But I suppose it doesn't have to be this way. Like, we could open up that presenting slot in the legislature meeting for also, like, as, the committee chair would be the one presenting, like whoever it is at the time, but could solicit, like, anything from the rest of WDIC in our meetings or otherwise as like what needs to be communicated to the legislature right now, and that can go there. And or I also think, and I'm not scheduling legislature meetings, but the DEI work, as much of it is going on, does not have any sort of regular spot other than the WDIC update on our full legislature meetings at all. So I think a lot of legislators, depending on their committee work, can do a lot of work for a long time and not really think about DEI very much, which it probably shouldn't be. And so I guess if other people here think it would be good, I would love to propose to the legislature leaders some sort of regular, like, equity or DEI initiative related update, maybe like quarterly at a full legislature meeting, or not update, but presentation. This is not a fleshed out proposal, but that is a thought that's come to mind and I'd like to pursue. Annie.
Wow, a lot of great stuff we're talking about. So keep the discussion going. So a couple of thoughts. Some of the things that were brought up, like, what's the purpose of this advisory, or this board, this committee? So our purpose is to advise the legislature. And someone said that there is sometimes a level of uncomfortableness with some members at sometimes about voting for things that are advising the legislature. So what do we do with that? But that's the reason we have this committee. And so when I think about other advisory boards, so like take PEAK, Planning, Energy, Environmental Quality, we have advisory boards, and those boards, they come to us, they ask to get on our agenda, any member can come and speak, and sometimes it's the chair, sometimes it's just a member of the committee or of that advisory board who has time or is passionate about something, and they come and they either speak at the beginning of the meeting for public comment, or they come and they talk about something that's on our agenda, or they propose things for our agendas. So I'm just thinking, going back to what are we doing with this board? I'm not sure exactly. What I would like to see is that we keep it as it is, and that hopefully people feel comfortable, and we have maybe a better relationship somehow, that staff can feel comfortable and community members can feel comfortable in saying, and voting for things and saying, yes, we're advising the legislature. We want you to do something. We think this is a good idea. We think this would help the county or the community. That's what I would like. I'm not saying it's possible, but I'm hoping that, and this is what this was, I believe this committee or this advisory board was set up for. And you take an example of like Veronica was saying about reporting to the committee that we report to, budget, capital and personnel, and the vice chair is Rachel, who is also an employee. I guess Veronica's an employee, I'm an employee in a way, but so can Rachel go to that meeting sometimes to report if Veronica can't, or take turns doing that? And what's the comfort level? I don't mean to put Rachel on the spot totally, but just speaking overall, like what's our comfort level? Where would we like to get to? And I really like the idea getting back to training. Training, I do agree, for legislature, should be with all staff. We need to connect more with our staff and not be siloed, because we are leading this team and we should be, but we need to be working together. And there's the ebb and flow, and I keep thinking like, well, Charlene probably has a diagram for this, and maybe she'll come up with one of how the information and advising and how we can work together. And because I think that being siloed and being uncomfortable we're kind of I don't say we're doing it, but there's a throttling down of what I think sometimes we can do or what we are thinking about doing. At the beginning of this meeting, I wrote up a short little resolution about this, for this committee to consider passing to advocate, urging the legislature, the county legislature, to keep the funding in the budget for the climate survey. And I've hesitated to even bring that up, but I'll just bring it up now. I have a short resolution written. I'd love to email it to everybody, but my first thought was, would people be comfortable in suggesting or urging the legislature about spending money? So I'll stop there.
Lisa, and then Nick.
I can speak structurally to a few different examples of where this may put staff and or department heads on the spot to be asked to do that. And it's not a question of whether they personally agree with a policy that is being discussed. It is, so for instance, if there's a staff member on WDIC who feels strongly about a certain policy that we're asking all department heads to report to WDIC, and they vote for that, and their department head disagrees with them, are there repercussions for that? They may feel that there are repercussions for voting for something that will put their department head, or the same thing for department heads. So that's one area where it's difficult for staff and or department heads to serve in a policy-making role. They can serve as an advisor to, and provide input from their perspectives, but that's just one of many examples. Or if a staff or department is having their budget cut in this budget process, and they are advocating for a climate survey, money to be spent on a climate survey, but there's not a committee organized around having their department's funding restored, they may feel mixed about that. So I'm just thinking of, and I'm not trying to speak on behalf of anybody here and their personal beliefs, I just think that those are some of the structural situations people may find themselves in and have difficulty when it's in the form of a resolution.
Nick, and then Charlene.
Yeah, I really appreciate particularly, Annie, your response and mentioning that you drafted this resolution and that, I appreciate you mentioning that you were kind of on the fence to mention it to us, but that you ultimately would like some, advising, right? So some advisory from us. That's the invitation, right? That's the welcome. And as a legislator, I see that as okay, right, yes, we are, and me as just a community member now, I see that as a reminder that, oh, okay, all of us in WDIC, Annie, a legislator who is also a member of our committee, is saying, hey, would like some advice on this, would like to open up the floor. It kind of brings me back to last year when we were sort of rushed for time with October, I believe it is. Yes, I should know this. And Veronica, I think, had mentioned we didn't have a lot of time, but if anyone wanted to draft or work on the resolution for Indigenous Peoples History Month. And this is not a dig on Veronica, it's more just for my example is, I think that was a cool opportunity where I know myself and I believe Rachel, we were kind of no, we want to see that resolution happen. We will take the time to put our edits and 2 cents into that. And so I think those are kind of a couple give and take opportunities that I'm seeing of Annie, a legislator and member of the committee saying, hey, I'd like some advice on this committee. And then the Indigenous Peoples Month, kind of us saying, hey, we want to do this, kind of present this with or for the legislature. So I guess I appreciate that.
Thank you. Charlene.
I am so happy for all of the discussion that's happening, and I really appreciate everyone's perspective. And Annie, thank you for making me laugh. I probably would have a map and something and a visual, I really would. So thank you for noticing that. But as a DEI practitioner, and Jen, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but sometimes we have to just bog down and buckle down and make a decision. And sometimes that decision is very uncomfortable because it doesn't allow for others to feel comfortable in it. And right now, I'd like to try to disrupt some of the talking in circles around what we could do, what we won't do, because it's very clear that this particular special committee was created for a specific reason, and this committee has achieved that goal. So now that the goal has been achieved, perhaps the conversation is not what will we do, but how do we update the committee structure to reflect this new level we've unlocked. So not Jen, Rachel and the Jedi team and Dr. Clark, we had to really have a come to Jesus moment about our D&I policy because it was 20 years old. This space is 20 years old and it has done what it has done and it's outgrown it. So when we went through the process with the policy, we had to make sure that the policy now reflected our current infrastructure. And perhaps this conversation is similar and the same, that it's more about our current infrastructure and how do we develop a special committee that reflects and aligns, like Lisa said and like Chantilly said, our current structure. And instead of continuing to talk about it, make a decision so that we can move forward in a cohesive manner. A lot of great things are coming out of this. Make every month proclamations, like what is the format of this particular, every, quarterly presentations at the legislative level, like making sure that all of those benchmarks are outlined clearly for succession planning. Should you not, be here, Veronica and Annie? What does that look like for the next legislature? And what does that look like for staff members and community members that are in our space? So I kind of just want to be the disruptor in the moment. We're talking in circles, and we just really need to make a difficult decision, but it's a good difficult decision because it means that this particular committee did its job, and that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Thank you. Kate?
Yeah, as a department head sitting in this committee, I would like to just denote that there is a difference between passing a resolution or asking for a resolution that is passed to actually have tasks done by people versus a resolution that is appreciating Heritage Month of insert, whatever that might be. I think that there is a differentiation in those two things, and I think to lump them all together is not necessarily fair. I also think that asking us to make a decision in a relationship, and my understanding of a relationship and the way things flow is it's a two-way street. And there is a hierarchy structure and there is a power dynamic and it exists. I think to start with, we could acknowledge it, right? I think the legislature has to put in the time, effort, and direction to decide what type of relationship they want to have with their staff, if they feel that's an issue. And I think department heads and then staff need to be reciprocal in that, and we have to make that work. So I am a bit uncomfortable with saying I'm going to make a decision that I'm going to stand up and say these things in a space that I might not be in. There's a chain of command in the government that we work in, and yes, we do need to disrupt that, but I just feel that we need to be careful about making generalizations about people in certain situations when we don't understand the context.
I think we're not talking about the same thing. I think you're talking about something entirely different. I'm talking about the structure of this particular committee and its goals and achieving its goals and where it's going to go, what kind of influence it's going to have, not necessarily individual voting and what alignment that will be. I'm talking more in a broader scope about right now, in the last year, have we achieved things that we set out to achieve? And if we did not, because we're not understanding the role of the committee, then perhaps defining the role and updating that would be the first step to get to that space. I haven't even gotten into the thick of the weeds of how people feel yet. So I just want to clarify, I don't think we were talking about the same thing.
Sure. No, I understand they're two separate things, but I think that the movement of the committee is tied directly to the individual votes and the power dynamic that exists in the committee. And I think that's something that I've spoken to Lisa and Veronica about, and I think it's a very valid point, and I don't want to lose that because I may not always be on this committee. There may be another person, and if I don't make that as a caveat, it's not fair for the next person who may feel differently. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. I don't think anyone else is on stack right now. Is that true? Oh, Annie.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond a little bit and clarify maybe a little bit of what I was saying and trying to understand and hear what other folks are saying, is that when I was saying like how I would like things to be, that's just like in my own head, and I'm thinking, in the couple minutes since then and hearing people of just like, what would be the goals. I think we get back to the goals, as ties into some of what Charlene was saying. Do we, what about the goals of the committee and how do we achieve that? And how do we achieve those? And that's, I think, the main thing that we need to think about and figure out how to do that. and interweave that and take that all into consideration of this unicorn of a committee that I am so grateful that even though people are, especially for staff, are in an uncomfortable position, some of them are feeling in an uncomfortable position when we have votes or whatever aspects that might be uncomfortable. I just want to say I really appreciate you being here and all the people that have been here before, and encourage people to please come, even though it's hard. I think overall, DEI work is actually hard and it's uncomfortable because it's a little bit different, and it asks us to rethink how we're doing things. And I just also want to just mention too, to what Nick said about having things, certain places where it kind of trips, like, hey, we're going to ask for advice of WDIC, or we're going to look at aspects of this, or we're going to check with our CEDO about, this aspect of certain things that it's kind of in the program. I think to me that's a yes and, like, we can look at it in certain times that it's just automatic, and then other times maybe this group or this board or legislators or staff are going to point out, hey, here's an opportunity to look at this. For instance, the flag policy is being looked at again for the county, and I was thinking, oh, wouldn't it have been nice if that was already in the policy, that if there is a current WDIC or equivalent committee, or if we have a CEDO person, have that person consult in that as part of that, and that's not in the policy to look at that, and so hearing that policy was being looked at, I'm like, oh, hey, maybe we should take a look at that. So I look at it as a yes and I really want to say again, I hope I didn't offend anybody. I'm really grateful to everybody that's here.
Thanks, Annie. I also want to express deep gratitude for everyone serving on or coming to this committee in this conversation and in other meetings, and most especially the non-legislators. I mean, love Annie and Travis, but this is what we do all the time, and so it's a little more special for the rest of you. Per Charlene's point, which I agree with, that we do need to make a decision about what WDIC or its successor's role is going to be. I'm not advocating that we make a decision now. That does not seem possible, like in this moment in this meeting. But does it make sense if offline I guess, WDIC members, someone, or not just members, come up with a proposal for what the structure of role in WDIC or its successor, should that make more sense, be, and then bring that back to a public meeting? And tied in with that question, which would come first, that or updating the diversity inclusion policy, or should they run together? Because either would affect the other, I think.
I think we should provide you with the updated D&I policy so you can perhaps maybe give feedback, but also get some inspiration around the direction JEDI decided to take.
So should we wait for the October meeting to see it and go from there?
Well, I would hope we get it to you before the October meeting so you can review, and then we could discuss during the October meeting. Would that be sufficient for you?
Oh, yes. Right, and I guess I forgot, presumably it'll be published at least by a week before the October meeting in the agenda packet.
Well, I could work with Brittany and the team to get it to you before then. You guys are awesome, by the way.
Oh, yeah. That would also be great. I was not clear if you have a draft edited policy, say, ready to go now, or if there was more work to be done that'll take time.
We're right there.
Okay. Well, take your time, but also don't. But
Noted.
yeah. Okay, so then I think at our October WDIC meeting, we'll have the updated D&I policy in hand. We will have all have had a chance to review it and have come up with, I guess I would ask us all to bring ideas on, could be an idea on what WDIC should morph into, or even just specific pieces of it, like, I don't think this aspect of the structure is working, or I think that given the new D&I policy, the role that isn't filled by anything else right now, and so maybe WDIC should, is X. Those things I think would be helpful, and then maybe we can create in and right after that meeting a more firm proposal for what WDIC should be or turn into. Rachel.
Do we also need to be looking at the bylaws of WDIC?
Yes, but I would propose that we be open to changing them drastically.
Yeah, agreed.
I can make sure that we include the bylaws. They can be sent out to all committee members prior to, actually, pretty much immediately following this meeting, and then included in next month's agenda as well.
Okay, thank you. I will admit, I know we updated the WDIC bylaws pretty recently, but prior to the required format for all advisory board bylaws being in place. And at the time we updated the WDIC ones, I think we were asked, or I was asked, like, are you sure you want to do this now, as opposed to waiting to see what the requirements are? And we said, look, these have not been updated in many years, so yes, we want to do this now. And I will admit, I have not gone back to see if they are now not in compliance with the new bylaw requirements, or if they happen to be anyway.
They do happen to be anyway, just.
Great. Charlene.
May I ask a question? Is it safe to utilize or be more intentional, about our language around WDIC? We're calling it an advisory board, but it's a special committee of the legislature that reports at the larger legislature. And I think the gap, if we use advisory board, kind of almost strips the power that it has in some ways. And you don't have to say yes, but I'm just looking over at in your direction. Like, being very specific about what this committee is could maybe help with how our relationships and things of that nature.
Kate?
Yeah, just something else that just came to mind. I think we've talked a little bit about the relationship between WDIC and then feedback from the legislature and how information flows. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't WDIC also, isn't the JEDI team sort of an arm or an extension of this committee? So is that true?
I don't know, but you could answer. Katrina's also emerged again, so I don't know if you have an answer.
Katrina's emerged.
WDIC is listed as an advisory board. It is not an actual committee of the legislature. So.
Thank you. Did anyone have an answer about the JEDI being an arm of it?
Not an extension of, sort of, I mean, I guess my thought is that this is really important, and I think we should get the language for the updated things to us, but I almost wonder, and we can decide it next month, but if it would be worth taking a pause and including JEDI in some of those conversations to make sure that if they are impacted and working in tandem with us, that they're also included in conversations or have the opportunity to do that. I mean, I don't know if that would be something or not, but.
I would say it's more a partnership in achieving the goals that we have for the organization. And the way JEDI is set up, I guess it's not really bylaws, but we kind of have our structure set up in a way that we require that there are 2 JEDI members that sit on WDIC so that there's open communication and a relationship there to achieve the goals that we're all working on together.
So maybe then it's just, I would be interested, and maybe I've missed this and we've asked this question, but to go back and see how they see our relationship with the legislature, and if there was something that we are not doing here or they would like to see us add or something to that forum, I think that would be I'd be interested in knowing what that was.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, and we can put that on our agenda for the next JEDI meeting.
Do you think, whether it's the next meeting or at some point, we could have some folks from WDIC come to a JEDI meeting to discuss this, and/or JEDI folks come to a WDIC meeting? I know that would be different because these are public and JEDIs are not. And I also recognize, Rachel and Ken, you come to both all the time, but just for this topic to do some cross-visitation for more.
Sure, yeah.
Storming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good idea.
All right, thank you. So are we ready to go forward with revisiting this between now and the next meeting and discussing in light of the updated D&I policy next meeting? Seeing mostly nods and thumbs up, fantastic. Okay, since WDAC is up for major changing, if it is okay with everyone, and especially Annie, maybe because you suggested it at some point, and also for this time, could we just skip discussing vacant seats in WDIC? Is that okay?
I can provide a very brief update if you'd like.
Go for it.
Okay. There is currently 1 seat vacant. It's a community member seat that is due to expire at the end of this year. We have 1 undesignated seat with a term expiring December 31st, 2025, and another undesignated seat with a term expiring December 31st, 2026. So there are currently 3 vacancies, 2 of which can be anybody who'd like to sit on there, and another would be a community member.
Great, thank you. Okay, questions, comments on vacancies? Yeah. All right. One added thing, I've just now gotten an email from the chair of the Government Operations Committee asking if how WDIC wants to go about looking at the flag policy again. I don't want to open a discussion, but could someone more knowledgeable, like Lisa or anyone else, explain, give advice? I was not around the first time, so I don't even have that to compare to.
Sure. It was super fun the first time around.
So I've heard.
But the policy originated from WDIC based on the flags commemorating certain heritage months, and circled around from there. So I think it would be great for this committee to have a look and be able to provide feedback on the proposed policy before it goes to GO for passage.
Okay, that sounds good. Can you remind me, what is the status of the flag policy now? Like, is someone currently looking at it to update it? And or if not, what happens before it would come to this committee?
So typically, staff in the responsible department for the policy look at it, and if there are sections that are in need of updating, they will recommend them, and there'll be a track changes version so everyone can see what's been changed, updated, deleted. And then that would go out to department heads and deputies for organizational review to get any additional comments there. And from then, when we have any of those comments incorporated, we would be sending it to WDIC first for review, and then any of those comments incorporated onto GEO.
Fantastic. Thank you for explaining that. All right. Last couple things. We're going to return to minutes approval at this point, so let us do that. Could I have a mover for the minutes of the July 24th, 2024 meeting? Rachel moves. Is there a second? Kate seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, let us have a roll call vote. I'll do Zoom first and then in chambers. Annie?
Yes.
Nick?
If I was not there, do I have to abstain? I've read the minutes, but what is the rule there?
You do not have to abstain, and I'm actually not.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to abstain.
Okay, then I will say yes. I've heard yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes unanimously. We are on to committee members' reports. Does anyone have any reports or announcements relevant to the work of WDIC? Oh, Brittany.
I was asked to bring forward the November meeting is currently scheduled for the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And historically, WDIC has combined their November and December meetings to an early December meeting. So just wanted to get that out there. We can certainly send date suggestions via doodle poll to the entire committee if that's easier.
I think that might be. Any thoughts right now? Yes, okay. I was going to announce a potential conflict depending on the date, but it's with a legislature committee, so you know about it.
Yep.
Any other reports? Going once, twice, gone. All right, with that, can I have a motion to adjourn? Kate? I'll second. We don't actually need this. All in favor of adjourning? That's approved. We're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.